Good morning, fifth graders. So today we're going to continue talking about decimal division. Today we are going to be looking at dividing with two-digit divisors. So this is something that we've done before. We've divided with two-digit divisors, two-digit numbers on the outside with whole numbers. We're just going to do it with decimals now. So let's take a look at number 1. I'll tell you right now that we are going to cross out B. We're not going to worry about that. So you go ahead and cross that out now. But let's take a look at number 1. So number 1 says 156 divided by 24 and 102 divided by 15 both have a quotient of 6 and a remainder of 12. And it's asking, are the division expressions equivalent to each other? So is the final answer going to be equivalent? It says to use your knowledge of decimal division to justify your answer. So I'm going to split kind of my space in half because I'm going to work out each of these. So let's look first at 156 divided by 24. So we know how to do this, right? We have already talked about dividing by a two-digit number. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to continue on after we get to our remainder. All right, so let's take a look here. So 24 divided into 156. So 24 can't go into 1. So we're going to put a 0 above the 1. 24 can't go into 15, so we're going to put a 0 there too. So now 24 into 156. So we can guess and check and try to figure that out, or we can use kind of estimating. So I look at 24, and I know that 24 is really close to 25, and 25 is kind of an easy number to multiply by. And I see 156. I know that 156 is closer to 160, but 150 is going to be easier for our estimating, and it'll give us a pretty okay starting point. So 25 into 150 I know gives me 6. So I'm going to try multiplying 24 times 6 and see how close I get to 156. So I multiply 6 times 4 and get 24. And then 6 times 2, I get 12, plus 2 more and I get 144. So I can't add another 24 onto there because then I'll go over 156. So 6 is perfect. So then I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 4 gives me 2. 5 minus 4 gives me 1. So normally this is where we would stop and we would just say a remainder of 12. But we're not going to do that this time. This time we're going to continue on. So to do that, we're going to turn our number kind of into a decimal. If you remember when we first started talking about decimals, we talked about how all whole numbers have an invisible decimal point at the end with a whole bunch of invisible zeros after that. Right? We've used those before when we're adding and subtracting. Sometimes we have to use those when we're dividing. So we're going to add our decimal point, and we're going to add an invisible 0 to the end. Since we have a decimal point there now, we have to remember to float our decimal point to the top, and then we can bring our 0 down. So now we have 1 into 120, right? 24 going into 120. So I know that 24 times 6 is going to give me 144. Well, 144 is pretty close to 120. That's not super far away. So let's try 24 times 5. So 5 times 4 gives me 20. And 5 times 2 gives me 10, plus 2 more gives me 12. Perfect. So our 5 goes up at the top, and we subtract our 120 and get 0. So 156 divided by 24 gives us 6 5/10. All right, so let's keep that in mind. So let's move over, and we're going to divide 102 divided by 15. So again, we know 15 can't go into 1, 15 can't go into 0, but it can go into 102. And since we know that our quotients are equivalent, right, they're sort of equivalent. They're both 6 with a remainder of 12. We know we're going to multiply by 6. So I'm going to off to the side multiply 15 times 6. I know that 5 times 6 gives me 30. 6 times 1 gives me 6, plus 3 more gives me 90. I'm going to subtract 90. So 2 minus 0 gives me 2. I can't subtract 0 minus 9, so I'm going to have to borrow. 10 minus 9 gives me 1. Again, normally this is where we would stop, and we would just call this the remainder. But we're not going to do that this time. We're going to turn our 102 into a decimal. Not our decimal point in our invisible 0. Our decimal floats up to the top, and our 0 drops down. So since 90 is smaller than 120, let's try 15 times 7 and see if we get any closer. So 7 times 5 gives me 35, and 7 times 1 gives me 7, plus 3 gives me 15. Oops, not 15, I'm sorry, that gives me 10. Sorry about that. That's still not quite close enough. So let's try 15 times 8. So 8 times 5 gives me 40. 8 times 1 gives me 8, plus 4 gives me 12. Perfect. So our 8 comes to the top, and we subtract 120 and get 0. So the expressions are not equivalent, right? We know that because 156 divided by 24 gives us 6 and 5/10, whereas 102 divided by 15 gives us 6 and 8/10. Even though both of their quotients are 6 with a remainder of 12, their real true answers, their full answers, are not equivalent. They're not the same. So that's something to keep in mind when we're dividing. If we need a really exact answer, then we need to kind of keep going and turn our numbers into a decimal rather than stopping with a remainder. Sometimes a remainder is fine. Sometimes that's all we need. But sometimes we need to know an exact answer. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep going. Let's take a look at a couple more. So if we take a look at 2a, we have 36 and 14/100 divided by 13. So we're going to set up our equation. So we have 13 on the outside, and 36 and 14/100 on the inside. We're going to float our decimal up to the top, and then we can start dividing. So 13 can't go into 3, so I'm going to put a 0 there. But 13 can go into 36. And 13 can go into 36 2 times. 13 times 2 gives me 26. I subtract, and I get 10. And since 10 is smaller than 13, I know I'm good to go. Then I'm going to drop my 1 down, and I have 13 into 101. So I need to figure out how many times 13 is going to go into 101. So let's try, I don't know, if we think about it 10 to 100, I know 10 can go into 100 10 times, but 10 is going to be too much for 13, right? That'll give us 130. So let's bring that down a little bit. Let's try 7. So we'll multiply 13 times 7. 7 times 3 gives me 21. 7 times 1 gives me 7, plus 2 more gives me 9. Okay, so that's pretty close. If I add any more onto it, I'm going to go over. So our 7 goes up to the top, and we subtract 91. 1 minus 1 gives us 0. We can't subtract 0 minus 9, so we're going to need to borrow. And 10 minus 9 gives us 1. We bring down our 4. And now we need to continue dividing. So 91 is pretty close to 104, so let's try 13 times 8. 8 times 3 gives us 24. 8 times 1 gives us 8, plus 2 more gives us 10. Perfect. So our 8 goes to the top, we subtract 104 and get 0. So our final answer here is going to be 2 78/100. So B, I want you to try on your own. So go ahead and pause the video, try B out on your own. If you get stuck, go ahead and play it and I'll start working through it. Or tune back in to check your answer at the end. All right, let's take a look at this. So we have 23 into 62 79/100. I'm going to float my decimal up to the top so that I don't forget. 23 can't divide into 6, so we have a 0. But 23 can divide into 62. I know that 20 can go into 63 times, so let's start with 2. So we have 23 times 2. 3 times 2 gives me 6. 2 times 2 gives me 4. If I go any more, if I try to do 3, we're going to have too much. It's not going to work. So our 2 goes to the top, and we subtract 46. We can't subtract 2 from 6. We have more on the floor, so we need to go next door and borrow 10 more. So we're going to borrow from 6, and that becomes 5. And our 2 becomes 12. 12 minus 6 gives us 6. 5 minus 4 gives us 1. Perfect. So now we drop down our 7, and we are looking at 23 going into 167. So this time we need a bigger number. So let's try 5. So 5 times 3 gives me 15, and 5 times 2 gives me 10, plus 1 more gives me 11. Not quite close enough, so let's go a little bit greater. Let's try 7. So 7 times 3 gives me 21. 7 times 2 gives me 14, plus 2 gives me 16. Perfect, that's really close. So our 7 goes up to the top, and we subtract 161. 7 times 1 gives me 6, and the rest will give me 0. And I bring down my 9. So now I have 23 into 69. Well, 2 wasn't enough. 5 was too much. Let's try 3. 3 times 3 gives me 9, and 3 times 2 gives me 6. Perfect. So our 3 goes up, and we subtract 69 and get 0. So our final answer is 2 73/100. So that's where we're going to stop for today. So you don't need to worry about the rest of the questions. If you want to work on them for practice, you absolutely can, but you do not have to. Let's take a look at your independent practice really quick. You only have a couple of questions. You have 2 division questions. It does say to estimate first and then divide. If you estimate better in your head, that's totally fine. If estimating doesn't help you at first, then don't worry about it. All I want you to really focus on is just dividing. And then you have a quick little word problem about a building in Illinois. All right. So you only have a couple of questions. If you run into any problems there, let me know or let Miss Sally know. We're happy to help. And I have a secret word for you today. That word today is chilly. Not the chili that you eat, chilly like it's cold outside. Alrighty, y'all. Like I said, if you need any help, you run into any problems, you're not sure about something, let me know or let Miss Sally know. We're both here and we're both happy to help. All right? Have a fantastic rest of your day, 5th graders.